plus videos and news articles. Whether you're looking for car shows, cruise-ins, meetups, automotive festivals, cars and coffees, or anything else relating to an internal combustion engine, then this is the site for you. Check it out online or on your phone at flacarshows.com.
Duesenberg's story began in Des Moines, Iowa, in 1913, when the Duesenberg brothers, Frederick and August, founded Duesenberg Automobile and Motors Company. Fred and Augie, as they were commonly known, were both brilliant engineers with a deep passion for automotive design and engineering. Their early careers included working for various automakers. In 1913, they decided to strike out on their own and establish their automobile manufacturing company. Their first creation, the Duesenberg Model A, was introduced in 1921. This modest yet well-engineered car featured a 260 cubic inch straight-eight engine and a remarkable 88 horsepower, making it one of the most powerful automobiles of its time. The Model A laid the foundation for the Duesenberg legacy of exceptional performance and engineering excellence. The true golden era of Duesenberg began in the mid-1920s, marked by the introduction of the Duesenberg Model J in 1928. The Model J was a masterpiece that set new standards in the luxury automobile market. It was powered by a colossal 6.9-liter straight-eight engine, producing 265 horsepower, and capable of reaching speeds of 119 miles per hour. This level of performance was unprecedented at the time. The Model J wasn't just about raw power, it was also a work of art. The Duesenberg chassis was designed to accommodate the coachwork of renowned custom coach builders. Owners could commission custom bodies that reflected their unique tastes, resulting in a wide array of stunning, one-of-a-kind designs. Some of the most famous coach builders who contributed to the Model J's allure included Murphy, Rolston, and Le Baron. The Duesenberg Model J quickly gained a reputation as the quintessential luxury car. Celebrities, dignitaries, and the elite of society were drawn to its impeccable craftsmanship, breathtaking design, and unmatched performance. It was a symbol of status and opulence, and the Model J soon became an icon of the Roaring Twenties. In 1930, the Duesenberg Model SJ was introduced, a more potent version of the Model J. Equipped with a supercharger, the Model SJ produced 320 horsepower, and it could reach top speeds of 140 miles per hour. The supercharged SJ was even more exclusive and remains one of the most sought-after vintage cars today. Duesenberg wasn't just about producing luxurious and powerful road cars. It also made a name for itself in the world of motorsports. The Duesenberg brothers' racing heritage and engineering prowess were evident in their racing cars. One of the most iconic racing cars of the era was the Duesenberg Model A, nicknamed Doozy. This race car was powered by a supercharged straight-eight engine and was dominant on the racetracks of the 1920s. It achieved numerous victories, including winning the prestigious Indianapolis 500 in 1924 and 1925. These victories helped solidify the Duesenberg name as a symbol of speed, power, and excellence.
Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting. Quiet, numbskulls, I'm broadcasting.
This is Bill Warner of the Amelia Island Concord Delegates, and you are listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Welcome, you're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio and Cars, and I'm your show host, Robert. Run your computers and Google TAN-Talk1340.com, and you can see me live here in the studios in downtown Clearwater. Don't forget to check out our website, GulfstreamMotorsports.com, and you can find out all about us. And if you've missed any of our past shows, do not forget to check out Nostalgic Radio and Cars.com. Good evening, Edward. How are you?
Howdy, howdy, howdy.
Yeah. Okay. Well, anyway, so we got a good show for you now. We got a special guest. Yes, this is the second show after our 15-year anniversary. And obviously we had our good friend Jay Leno on helping us out last week. And a couple quick shout outs, flacarshows.com, where you find out about all the car shows taking place in the state of Florida. Big shout out to Tara. She's a good girl over there. If you want to run some ads, reach out to flacarshows.com. Fastlane Travel. Yeah, we got our Moonshine Festival driving tour coming up this fall, and that should be a lot of fun. We've already got a few people signed up for that. We're looking forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun, a lot of exciting driving, some great hotels, resorts actually, restaurants, just really cool stuff. A couple of museums. We're going to go to the Wheels Through Time, and then the Motorcycle Museum in Maggie Valley. I got a friend of mine up there that's got a couple of antique stores, so we're going to be able to go browse around in there, and you never know what we might find in the countryside. So check out FLT, fastlanetravel.com, and you can find out all about the Moonshine Tour. And then, I've always worn loafers for the last 30, 40 years. So a big shout out to my friends over there at Midway Shoe Repair. And I like one of their little sayings on the wall. It says, "We're here to heal your soul." Hardy har, 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 har. So a big shout out to Jake and those guys over there. By the way, give them a call, 727-581-2166. There's not a lot of guys out here to repair shoes, but hey, sometimes if you got some small stuff, rather than buy $70, $80 shoes, and you can get them fixed for like 30, $20, something like that. It's not a bad deal. And then, of course, when you break down, which I do very seldomly, but when I do, I reach out to my friends over there, Lisa and everybody at Evelyn's Towing. So they're over there in Pinellas Park, I guess you would say it, or actually Clearwater. It's over there off of Automobile Boulevard. Give her a shout out, 727-579-8164. That's Evelyn's Towing. Now, we got a special guest coming on here in a few minutes. And so let me just tell you what I did this weekend. Now, I've been kind of scrounging around the state looking. Actually, I went up to North Carolina about a month ago, brought back a couple cars. I went up 1 week and brought back a 54 Buick. The following week, I went barn finds now, mind you. And the following week, I had to go up and get another car for a friend of mine, or went with him actually to get it. And it was a 49 Merc. Well, now we're on this quest to go chase these old cars. So we've been finding all kinds of stuff. And there's a lot of fun doing that. Chasing out old cars. Now, having said that, this past weekend, I went on a little driving tour with the Thoroughbred Region Porsche Club, and we drove over to Astor and then back, and then drove around. And then I branched off and went by a friend of mine's shop, his house. And not only did he have vintage tractors, well, he has a ranch. So he's got cattle, he's got horses, he's got donkeys. There's a reason they have donkeys, and that's because if the coyotes or the wolves or whatever, the not so friendly animals come on their property and decide to, go after the cattle or the sheep or goats or whatever you might have, donkeys are pretty aggressive. That was all fine and dandy until I went down the street and I saw a guy that had a bunch of ostrich-looking things, and those were emus. So there's people out there with tons of emus, and they can get pretty mean also. But anyway, while I was over at my friend's house, his shop, Terry, shout out to Terry if you're listening, he had a beautiful collection of motorcycles, vintage motorcycles, all kinds of stuff, a lot of British stuff, as well as his British car collection. He had a Healy over there, he had a TR4 over there, a couple Porsches, and a Mercedes, and some other interesting cars. And but two things that caught my attention was this vintage wooden boat, which is a hacker craft. And it's not just your average hacker craft. This is kind of like he also has a 28-foot 28-foot cigarette with twin engines in it. And I looked at those boats back in the day. That was kind of like in the 70s, a 28-foot was a big boat. By today's standards, it's a toy, because everybody's running 50-footers, 51-footers. Your average Apache is 47 feet. Your average cigarette now is 42. But these guys are running these MCIs and some of these other Nortex and stuff, like when we were down at the Miami Boat Show, and 50-footers, the average, $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million. But anyway, so he had this beautiful cigarette there. Well, his hacker craft is probably a late 20s, early 30s version of that of his cigarette. Long bow, set towards the rear, engines in the front though, not in the back. And that's so for ballast, I guess that makes sense. But the occupant, the cabin, it's not really a cabin, but just the area that you sit in is in the back of the boat. But it's just got this really long bow, and there's something about that. It's kind of like if you look at a PT boat, PT boats have a really long bow and a short back deck, and that's just for the crew and carry their gear and their little explosives that they roll off, to blow up a few submarines if they can. I don't know if you guys remember the TV show McHale's Navy with Tim Conway back in the day, and Sid Caesar, and trying to think who else was. Oh, and Ernest Borgnine and Captain Binghamton. But that was a fun. You remember that show, McHale's Navy, when you were a kid, Ed? Did you ever watch that?
I think I saw reruns.
Reruns? Okay. Yeah, they actually are one of those TV shows. But that was a lot of fun. So anyway, So PT boats were kind of like the forerunner to the rum runner, if you will, or the when they were when they were bootlegging booze up and down the Atlantic coastline and inside the Gulf of Mexico, as well as wherever else. They picked up used old military vessels, and because the PT boats were usually, if I remember correctly, they were somewhere between 50 and 75 feet long, and they could take deep water. They had deep V hulls, and they were real good at taking a chop. And so those boats became converted to, run alcohol up and down the Atlantic coastline from the Carolinas and places like that, Georgia, and then all the way up to, New York and New England and from there elsewhere. At any rate, but he had really cool collection stuff. But while I was driving around, I decided to just, you're out there on the road. So it's a lot of times on weekends, people have their garage doors open. So when their garage doors are open, you just never know what you're going to run into. I mean, I found an old Avenger. Most people don't know what that is, but it's a replica of a Ford GT40, but it's based off a Volkswagen frame. I actually found two things, those little Volkswagen things, countless bugs, Cougars, a lot of Chevy trucks, a lot of Ford trucks, a Mustang here and there, a couple Firebirds. Another guy had a couple Cutlasses. He was an interesting character. He was a retired cop from Rhode Island, but he was like 2 miles down the road from Tasca Ford. So he had some really cool Tasca Ford stories telling me in the 60s when they had all their really cool drag cars out there and the race cars and the Shelbys and the Cobras and all that stuff, which is lined up all over that place. And it was really cool back in the day. And but he used to do a lot of street racing. He's also in the process of working on a 64 Galaxy that he kind of modified. So it was a 3-speed car originally, but he put a 4-speed in it. It's bench seat, which is cool, 2-door, XL, nice looking car, and a 390 in there with a few little goodies in the motor. So kind of neat old piece. But I said, what are you doing with these Cutlasses? He says, well, they just sit here. He's had the one Cutlass he had for 30 years. The other one's had for 14 years. And he doesn't drive him much. And I said, how come? He says, well, I'm getting older. I just sit out here and just stare at them. And, a lot of guys are kind of getting that way. Well, if I take it out and drive it, now this kind of killed me. Well, if I take it out and drive it, then I got to bring it back. I got to clean it and detail it. But if I don't take it anywhere, I just sit here and I relax and I just tinker in my garage. I can stare at it. Okay, I get that. That's why we have trailer queens. But my attitude is just get out there and have a good time. None of my cars are nice. My cars are all like beaters, if you will, or just driver quality. And that's really what you want to get. When I was sitting at the restaurant, the guy next to me who was in a Porsche, he was interested in buying an early air-cooled car. And he was asking me, so what do you think? What's a good investment? Everybody will tell you, the guys that are, those of us that are appraisers and dealers, don't buy the car because you think it's going to be an investment. So he asked me that, and I said, well, an AC Cobra, a Gullwing, a 275 GTB, 4-cam. He goes, well, those are all multi-million-dollar cars. I said, yeah, if you talk about investment. But if you want to have fun and you're talking a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 car, just go out and buy yourself a nice air-cooled 911 or buy yourself an Austin Healey or buy yourself a Jag or buy yourself a Boss 302 or a Shelby or a Z28 or a Chevelle SS or, GTO, Trans Am. Those cars are going to hold their value if they're real cars. Not necessarily have to have matching numbers, but just because they're real cars. That's what it's all about. They're honest cars. And that's kind of where you're going to be. And then if the market goes up, you got a bonus. If the market goes down, you always have a car that you like. That's the most important thing. And I cannot overemphasize that. Don't buy a car because you think it's going to be an investment. Now, if you happen to, now, no lie, this happened. If you happen to bump into a guy that's got a 63 Corvette split window sitting in his garage, well, and you can buy it for $25,000, you better jump on that one because you can double your money right there. Now, that's few and far between. I actually know where there's a few squirreled away, but unobtainable. And but when we were on our trip up there in North Carolina, we were at this guy's shop and we were looking at some of his old Chevys and Fords and Cadillacs and all this other weird stuff. And he had a kind of a fixer-upper kind of shop. And I walked in the back. I said, do you mind if I look around? And he said, sure, go ahead. So I walked around the corner. Now, again, I'm a Ford guy, but I do have a thing for split windows. I've missed those. Those are missed opportunities for me. It's probably one of the few Chevrolets I actually would own. And I go walking in the back shop, and sure enough, There's a bright red 1963 Corvette split window. Fairly nice car, 300 horse car, 4-speed, red car, black interior. Kind of nicely done. I said, oh my God. So I called my buddy Mark real quick. I go, Mark, check this out. Check this out. He goes, oh my God, you found your car. And I go, no, because it's not for sale. And I go, so I was talking to the guy earlier. I said, what's the story on it? He says, the guy that bought it paid $110,000 or $115,000 for it, and they're going to resto-mod it. Because they think if they resto-mod it, they can resell it for $250,000. I don't know. Who knows? But that's not my cup of tea. I would just leave the car the way it is because the car is original. It's only original once or fairly close to original. And that's, I don't want to use the word charm because when you say charm, the charm of a classic car, you know, like an old Porsche or an old Jaguar, a Healy or something like that, you know, an old Mercedes, a vintage car. There's a certain charm that those cars have, you know, out of the 50s and 60s. And it's just nostalgia. And those cars are fun to drive. And they have that, you know, when you get into an American car, it's Americana, you know, you get into an late 50s, early 60s, full size, you know, Chevrolet, Ford, Cadillac, Chrysler. Those are stylish cars and they're big and they're American, you know, and then of course in the late 60s, you know, we got into power and performance and it's, you know, muscle car and it's grinding gears and slamming those things forwards and backwards and burning the tires and sliding sideways and drag racing and street racing and road racing and all that fun stuff. And European cars, well, when you drive those cars, you have to have a little finesse, you know. Now, granted, they make some really cool racing sports cars. There's no question about that. But you don't bang on those cars. You drive them with finesse. You roll through the gears. You know, you don't jam on the brakes. You don't floor it off the line. You just accelerate and you drive and you slowly hit the brakes and you just enjoy. It's all about the experience, you know. It's kind of like these driving tours that we do with Fast Lane Travel, you know. It's all about the experience, the camaraderie, the fun. It's just like this weekend when we did these driving tours. In fact, reach out to us and because we might be doing some weekend stuff. There's a lot of, you know, I've got a group of people that want to do just some driving. And I will tell you up there in North Florida, north of Brooksville, really, and you get up in that area and you get up around Gainesville and Ocala and Astor and over towards Citra and up towards Lake City. There's some beautiful roads up there. I mean, you don't have to go over to Pensacola because guaranteed on the way west of Tallahassee, there's some beautiful roads out there. I could get lost because every once in a while when I have to do appraisals and valuations for Birmingham up there for the Barber Motorsports Museum, I have to kind of diddy bop over there. And so I take all the back roads. I get off the highway. I take the back roads. I try to do that as much as I can during the daytime. The only time I'm on the highway is at night because there's nothing else to see anyway. But if there's daylight, I'm on a country road someplace and I'm lollygagging. I got people honking a horn. I bet you I don't go faster than a tractor because I'm looking left and right, rubbernecking. In fact, I'm surprised my neck's still on my shoulders. It's sore because there's so much cool stuff. But anyway, having said that, it's time to go ahead and get our guests on the phone. We're gonna fire up the stereo. I went 5 minutes overtime. Oh well. But anyway, we got a special guest coming on. We're gonna be talking about some really cool cars and a very interesting museum. So hey, here's a little Monkeys, Mary Mary. Quite contrary. Anyway, you're tuned in to Nostalgic Radio Cars. Don't touch that dial. Run it up.
Mary, where are you going to? Mary, Mary, tell me truly, what did I do to make you leave me? Whatever it was, I didn't mean to. You know I never would try and hurt you. Mary, Mary, where are you going to? What more, Mary, can I do to prove that my love is truly yours? I've done more now than a clear-thinking man would do. Mary, Mary, it's not over. Where you go, I will follow.
Hi, I'm Corky Coker, and you're listening to Nostalgic Radio and Cars.
Okay, we're back, and you're tuned into Nostalgic Radio and Cars, and it's time to introduce Mary. I'm delighted to welcome to the show this evening the curatorial research assistant for the Savoy Automobile Museum located in Cartersville, Georgia. Delighted to welcome to the show this evening, Mary Agruso. How are you?
Thank you. I'm doing just wonderful. I'm laughing while I'm hearing this song because we have a gentleman here locally by the name of Brian Fuller. He used to work with Chip Foose, and we did a 20-year retrospective for Brian. And my boss told me, he said, now Brian's going to call you about the cars. And so the phone rings, and this voice I pick up, and this voice is singing that song, and I had no idea who it was. And I thought, is somebody pranking me? Because that was Brian Fuller.
Well,
so I laugh every time I hear that song.
Brian's been on this show, and I know Brian. Okay, so that's what a coincidence. We have a lot of connections here. You know, Corky Coker.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
I heard that you may be coming our way in June.
Yes.
Maybe. Well, while you do that, we are only about an hour south of Corky, but there's also up in Chattanooga, there is the tow truck museum. Since you were in the business, that might be something you might want to look into.
Well, yeah. In fact, Lisa and I were talking about that earlier because when I was in the wrecking yard business, I still have my rollbacks. I had two of them back in the day, and I have a lot of friends that are in the towing business, and they have a Florida tow show here, which is usually every April. So yeah, definitely. And so here, I did not know. And I was, I always noodle around a little bit, and I discovered that you occasionally make an appearance on a radio show.
Yes, I do. Usually,
and it's Stories from the Driver's Side.
Correct. It's on a local radio show here. In fact, I'll be on it tomorrow morning. And lately I've been doing a longer running series on Henry Ford, but tomorrow one of the guys from Acme, which is the Atlanta Car Modeling Enthusiast Club, is going to be coming on because we do a lot of things with them. They bring what are called make and takes. These are like small kits that don't require glue, and they work with kids to get them to sit down and build a model car. And it's to help generate interest in cars in the younger generation.
Well, that is one way to develop the bug, because when I was a little kid, one of my first, well, in terms of recollection, toys was a car. And then my next, and you could, my grandmother came from Germany or Austria, and she brought me this little Schuko, Mercedes-Benz, and the trunk would open and the spare tire would come out. And it actually had a little tool that you could pop the hubcap off with and take the lug nut off and then change the spare tire. And I was so enamored with that. And then the next thing is I got into building models, which I still do from time to time. And so, yes, that's how you get bitten by the bug. And the only difference is the cars get bigger and more expensive.
Oh, absolutely. Well, have you been to a car model show lately? Because they have the big one here. I think it's usually around the end of October. Oh, it is not like the day when I was building model cars. I mean, I walk in there and I look at that and say, why didn't we have this stuff? I mean, people are doing 3D printing. They are doing crazy, crazy stuff.
Really?
Beautiful stuff. Oh, it has gone way far than, having the tube of Tester's glue, which I never understood. Why were people smelling that? I mean, we were on Tester's glue and spray painting down in the basement and never worried about any of that stuff. But yeah, model car collecting and building, oh, it's a whole different ballgame. If you get a chance, come up and see the show here. You will just be amazed at what you can buy and then what people are doing.
Well, that's interesting. Again, it's getting kids to develop a hobby, develop a passion, and be creative outside of, these electronic little devices here, that everybody seems to walk around with. But,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Now I want to back up a second. You said that you built models and you were using the little Tester's cans and the listers and the little Tester's glue, tube of glue. Now, again, like you, I didn't smoke. I didn't sniff it. I don't know who got into that crap or how that got out of control.
Yeah.
But it was just one of those things. We didn't think anything of it,
No.
And
no, you were just worried about gluing your fingers together if you weren't careful.
Or
that was the worst.
Yeah, or get it on a fresh paint job that you just painted the car.
Or on your mother's kitchen table, and you're going to have a hard time getting it off without damaging the table. But yeah, no, I built model cars, and I had an older brother, and we built push carts. and we had go-karts in the neighborhood. And then about a block up from my house was a garage. And fortunately, they tolerated kids coming and hanging out, including yours truly. And I learned a lot about tearing down motors and working on cars just from being around them. Now, this gentleman, he drove a modified stock car, which was not like on the NASCAR series, but I think he was like a 40 Chevrolet. But I just got infused with that. And then at one point, Hayden Prophet came to town on the East Coast. He wound up staying there. So I was into drag cars and following drag racing. So yeah, I was a gearhead way back when.
Well, let me ask you this: where are you from originally?
Originally from a little town called Bridgeton, New Jersey.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, sort of midway between Philadelphia and Atlantic City, in the southern part of the state that doesn't exist. If you live Trenton or north, the southern part of the state doesn't exist. But that's where I got my start and got into cars and just loved them. Used to collect stuff. It was really nice. We had Herb McCandless here last year. Now, I had pictures of Mr. Four-Speed in my scrapbook, but to actually get to meet him was really a treat. And of course, he was thrilled to find somebody, who as a kid had actively been following him. And so he sent me this big poster for Christmas with the car doing the wheelie and everything, which was just a thrill to me. So I've met Shirley Muldowney. She was here. Steve Hunnell. Freddie Neely is supposed to be dropping off tractors of all things. And, I remember watching him, in the 90s doing, funny cars. And so we're going to be borrowing some tractors for him for a display that we have coming up called Harvest to Highway. And it's going to be tractors and vehicles that were built by the same company.
Interesting. So the name Savoy Automobile Museum, where does the name Savoy originate?
Well, when the property here was being developed, this was an old family farm, and they had not come up with a name. We were part of a group of museums, but they still hadn't a name. And the board got a call from the people doing the land development. They said, "Hey, look, we found something on the property. What do you want us to do with it?" And they came out, and it's a 1954 Plymouth
Savoy. Okay, I got you. I'm just going to go there.
So it is outside of the museum. It was not salvageable per se. I mean, we have taken it to the point that it probably won't deteriorate anymore. But when it was found, there was a tree growing out of the trunk. So when it was placed in its new spot outside, they replanted a tree. So eventually the tree will grow full the way that it was. But that's where we got the name from.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, all right. So how big is the building?
It's over 60,000 square feet. The exhibit hall space is about 60,000. I think there's about 66 altogether, but admin is in there. Plus, we have a full theater that will seat just under 300 people. We have the largest curved screen in the southeast. We do a movie once a week, but then usually for every exhibit we have, because we bring in a new exhibit every month, we will usually have a special speaker come in. People like Wayne Carini have been here. Ken Gross, Tom Cotter will be here next month doing the Barn Find exhibit. We have a turntable built into the floor so we can bring a car in. While the speaker is talking, they can rotate the car 360. They can put it up on the screen behind. So, we have that. But then also the building is also used as an event facility. So earlier tonight, I was out with a group that had rented one of our private dining rooms. I did a private tour for them here. We have businesses come in and rent the theater, use our private dining rooms, have tours. We have a big pavilion out back, so we've had some car clubs come and have their events out there. They can park their cars out there, have their own little show, but it's a covered canopy. There are picnic tables out there. So it's sort of a multi-purpose facility.
Now, you were also mentioning, and I'm going to jump around here just for the beginning, just to kind of get people kind of familiar, but you also have, was it one or two sister museums in town?
We actually have three. We're part of what's called Georgia Museums Incorporated. And so right in downtown Cartersville is the Booth Western Art Museum, and that has the largest permanent collection of Western art in the United States. Now, it's not all on display at any one time. They do rotate pieces in and out, but cumulatively, it is the largest collection in the U.S. We also have in the old courthouse downtown the Bartow History Museum, and then about 2 miles up the road from us is the Telescience Museum. It was the former Wyman Mineral Museum. And back in the day when 75 was being built, it stopped at Cartersville, and the Wyman family built this little mineral museum to give people a reason to get off and come see Cartersville. Well, when GMI purchased it, they have since expanded it, and now they are, I think the newest addition to that is they're putting about another 20,000 square feet of exhibit space on that also. So we're all connected together.
So how does it work with the rotating exhibits? What is is this like something that's a collective effort with because I know the Audrain does this, and I think there's some other museums out west that do this. So do you kind of is it like a Southeast thing? Is it a Eastern Seaboard thing? Does it include exhibits that you go from the West Coast to the East Coast, and these rotate to other museums? How does that all kind of work? Because I think there's also one in North Carolina someplace too that's a museum that rotates a collection. Because a few years ago they had a Porsche one on display.
Okay, so we actually in the building we have 5 different galleries. One of them is dedicated just to Savoy cars, and that will hold about, depending on what we put in there, usually about 14 to 15 of our own cars, and that is that is a little more static. Sometimes things will change, like we just put a 40s Willys in there that we just got. It's been totally restored. But that stays relatively static. Of the other 4 galleries, one of them changes out every month. So theoretically, you can come in every 3 months and the building is completely different. Now, we work a lot with Ken Gross. He was very instrumental in the very beginning of the foundation of the museum to get the idea of going to not dragging all the cars that we own and put them all in, cram them in the building. People will come once, they'll see them, say, nice collection, they don't come back. He was the one that helped us develop the idea of doing rotating exhibits where there is always something new coming in. And so my boss, who's Bruce, the curator, they sit down with Ken and they will talk out. We've already mapped out 2026 for what is coming, because we have to be that far in advance to really start working with either other museums or private owners if it involves bringing in cars that we don't already own. If our cars will fit the bill, then we bring ours in, but then we will fill it in with either through private individuals or other museums. Probably the longest distance we've done, we really try to stay closer to the Eastern Seaboard simply because we pay for transportation, but we did a first ever curated exhibit of Chip Foos's personal cars, and it was called What's in Chip's Garage. He came here to see Brian Fuller's 20-year exposition of work and had never been here, liked the building. And so that night, I've never seen an exhibit come together this quickly. The idea was, let's do your things. And so we had, I think, 14 of his personal vehicles here. And now most of those came from California, but we had the Hemisphere here. We even had the model that he built when he was in school, so that we had that on display, and just a wide range of his personal cars. And so it was really good to be able to say to people, we're so used to seeing his work, which is absolutely gorgeous. But when you see what he builds for himself, and he'll say, look, I can't afford myself. I can't do for myself what I get paid to do for other people. But his personal style is very subtle, but very, very sophisticated. And he was a great person to work for. Really nice guy to work with.
Well, now Brian is mostly a motorcycle guy, and of course I've known him for years also. But he did a couple cars. I saw him at SEMA, and he had him at PRI when they used to have it here in Florida, in Orlando. In fact, that's where I actually met him, and that was years and years and years and years ago, probably 15 years ago, maybe 14 years ago, something like that. And he actually they were doing Two Guys Garage over in Tampa.
Yeah.
So him and can't think of the other guy's name, Burge's last name. And they both came over here and they sat in the studio with us here. But Kevin or Brian also, like I said, he does a lot of stuff with Barber Motorsports Museum, which is just down not too far from you guys also. And so is Brian, is he outside of Atlanta, closer to Cartersville, or is he more in the Atlanta area?
He's more in the Atlanta area. I think his shop is over in Tucker, and it's in the Tucker area, which is sort of like the southeast. Now, he had been kicking around the idea of moving back up to Tennessee. But I think his son is still in high school, so there wasn't going to be anything done until his son finished high school. Because Chip Foos was kicking around the idea about coming out over here.
Really?
But I guess when he saw the area and you saw, the space, because there is a lot that's actually going on here. We're so close to Chattanooga. There's a lot that happens over in this area. Now, whether or not anything comes out, we'd love it if he'd move in. We'd say, move next door, please. I don't know that that's going to happen, but he really liked it. He liked the idea of the college next door, that we have a college that's right next door to us. We have been in the beginning talking stages with them of maybe, hey, can we ultimately somewhere down the line develop a program sort of like the one that's out in the Midwest? And why am I blanking on the name of the school out there that is so famous? McPherson was to do something like that, but to do that here.
Oh,
and of course, there's a lot that would have to do working through the Georgia educational system, but at least we're in talks with the school that is right next door, and there's interest. So maybe a couple years down the line, we're going to have something like that, which would be wonderful.
Mary, give us a little background on yourself. It was interesting because I actually had a chance to kind of skip through a couple of those radio shows that you did, stories from the driver's side. And I did, because I'm a Ford guy, obviously I listened to most of the Henry Ford thing, and I did know most of it, but there's a few things that you touched on that I was not aware of in there. And of course you get thrown around, but we don't have a lot of time to get into that right now. But give us a little background on yourself and how your passion, did you, before you did what you're doing now, were you actually involved in the automobile business somehow, to some extent?
No, I was actually, once I got out of high school, I wound up moving up to Philadelphia, and I pretty much got out of, I was still following cars, but I wasn't really as involved with them. Definitely not hands-on because I didn't have a car in Philadelphia. Once I got married, we moved back to New Jersey. My husband, of all things, had a father who was a mechanic, but never taught him anything about cars. But he decided that he was going to start working on ours, and of all things, he got into Volvos, and we had a couple 544s. One ran, the other were parts cars. We had a 144 wagon. We always wanted an 1800. We never got to that, but it was always something that was always in the back of my mind. Well, then I got totally sidetracked and went off into graphic design and did that for decades. And so I was living in Florida at the time. We lived over on the East Coast, and we had like 3 hurricanes in 6 weeks. And I said, that's it. I've had it. I'm tired of this. And so I worked for what was Bell South at the time. They had an opening up here in Cartersville for an artist. We came up here. I was with Bell South for about a year, and then they moved my job over to Tucker, where Brian is, which would have been like a 2-hour drive for me. And I said, I don't think so. So I worked with some people here locally, and then I decided at that point I was ready to stop, and my husband said, why don't you go back to school? And so I spent about 7 years going back to school to get a degree in English with an emphasis on writing, and was really enjoying that. And of course, we see that the museum is getting ready to open up, and so they had the opportunity, if you're interested in volunteering, put in your name, which we did. And it was a while before we heard anything, and we were asked to come in, and what they needed were people to do tour guides. And I was like, oh yeah, well, hey, sign me right up. And so we both were doing that. Well, the person who was doing the job that I'm doing, she was like sharing between with Bruce, the curator, Lisa, who does marketing. She was working for both. Well, she became sick. And so they said to some of the docents, they said, hey, do you mind writing the reader boards? Can you help us out? I said, well, sure. That's what I do. And so I started helping with writing the reader boards. And then when it turns out that Emily wasn't going to be able to come back, they approached me and said, hey, would you consider working part-time here? And I'm like, yeah. My husband finally told Bruce, my boss, he said, you could have offered her a bag of popcorn. and she would have said yes. It wouldn't have cared what you were going to pay her. She would have. You could say anything, and she'd go, "Yeah, I'm coming there." And so I've been here for about 3 years now.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Are you still in the Volvos?
No. We after we got done with, we had the 122, and then we wound up selling that car and have sort of migrated through a number of things. Right now, I have like a 2002 PT Cruiser with a little over 200,000 miles on it, which I will keep till it has to be rolled off a cliff and die because I love the car. And then my husband's got like a 99 Infiniti, and we both have just got our cars and we love them, and he keeps them running. Both of them, have the original engines, transmissions, the whole 9 yards. We just do the basic maintenance. Both of them are still chugging along. So, right. And to me, I've got the best of both worlds. I am surrounded by gorgeous cars of every stripe and color. And some of them here, if we own them because I work for the curator, I can drive them. And because I know how to drive a stick, I can drive a lot of the cars, especially the older ones. So I really get to enjoy them. But if something goes wrong, it's I don't have to pay the bill. So I'm sort of spoiled.
Well, just in case, because I happen to know where there's a little 65 P1800, and it's been sitting in a garage for probably 25 years that I know of.
Oh, it needs help.
And it's an original black car with red interior.
Oh, my husband would say SU carburetors.
Yes, he would say SU carburetors.
Oh, yeah. And he is not a fan. He had enough, because we had those cars in New England, and our 544 literally froze to the road one day when he was in grad school, and he had to get hot water and melt the ice off the tires to get the car so he could drive the class. So you say Volvo to him as much as he loves them, the first thing he says, SU carburetors. So I don't think he's ready to go back.
No, wait a minute. SUs are nowhere near as bad as a Stromberg. Okay.
Yeah, true.
That's worse. True. Okay. So, but nothing beats a good old Holly on top of a good old American V8. But anyway, having said that, all right. So, what are some of is there a car or two in there that you really, really get excited about? In fact, we're talking about, you were talking about Jeffrey. Of course, Ken's been on our show. Everybody you named has been on our show at some point in time. So these are all alumni members of Nostalgic Radio and Cars as well. But and I probably mentioned it to you before. One of the cars in the fiberglass collection there is Jeffrey Hackers, and he's been on our show bunches of times. But one of the cars belongs to a guy that I actually met in Arizona years ago when he was in the process of building that car.
Steve Briscoe.
That's it, Steve.
Novetta.
Pardon me?
The Novetta.
The Novetta. Yeah, it's not a vet. Novette. Okay, so it's not a Jamaican, but he invited me over to his house. And but interestingly enough, I don't know, have you guys ever had a Bugatti display there?
We had a Bugatti that was here. That was it wasn't all Bugattis. It was part of a European elegance cars.
Oh, okay.
That we had one. So it was just a single one that we had. But his Novetta. Oh my God. And we were fortunate. He came when we had the program. He was one of the speakers. So for me, it was a treat to be able to talk to him and to get a little bit more of the backstory, because of 20 years building a car. That is dedication.
Well, there's a car show in Arizona, and it's on Saturday, and I think it's at the can't think of the name of the shopping center that's there that everybody goes to. There's like 1,000 cars, and they just come and go all day long. Anyway, he was there with that car, and what struck me about the car was the fact that he had these Lotus wheels on there, like off a Lotus open wheel car. And then the other thing that he had, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, I might have mentioned it to Lisa, but he had two other things that I noticed, and it was the seatbelts and the little the ray dot mirrors that he had on there. So I had an MGB GT. So when I went over to his house, those seatbelts that he has in his car, at the time, I think he said, when he told me originally, I think he said they came out of a helicopter, but then in the speech that he gave on your show, or at on the visual there, he mentions that they were part of a parachute.
They were the
seatbelt.
parachute harness. Vietnam era parachute harness. Yeah.
Right. So he had some extra ones. So I bought those with the intentions of putting those in my car. And I also copied his mirror brackets that he used because I'm running gray dots also. So, and then I bought some other little odds and ends from him. But he was a very interesting guy. And do you remember back in the 70s, 60s and 70s, there was a company out in California that used to sell aftermarket high-end stuff for European car gloves and horns and fog lights and steering wheels. And the company was called Wilhelm Hahn, H-A-H-N or H-A-A-H-N.
Oh, that doesn't sound familiar.
Well, we got on the subject about that because he had some steering wheels hanging up and I saw one and he says, yeah, he actually, if I remember correctly in the story, he said he actually worked for Wilhelm Hahn back in the day when he was in California. He's got a real interesting background. So where I'm going with this whole thing is it's this, like Donald Osborne says, and most of us, it's not so much the car, it's the story that is around the car. And those stories, the people, the stories, that's what adds value.
And for me, since my job is doing the research on it, when we do our reader boards, on the left-hand side, we will just give all the basic, the technical information. This is the engine, the transmission, wheelbase, blah, 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 blah. But I have about 150 words that I can put into, about the car. And I really like to look for, first thing, is there an interesting backstory to this car? Does it relate to, someone like Steve Briscoe, writing about him? It took 20 years to build this car and all the things that he had to do, the parts that he had to scrounge to find, the fact that he's got on the back of it, he's got hinges from a Mini Cooper because it was the only thing that would fit the line of the car. And he said, I should have just built the car myself from scratch because I spent so much time having to find things that would fit because of the lines of the car. Or, who owned it, or why did the car succeed? Why did it fail? Why did they even bring it to market in the first place? Sometimes what was going on in the world, like we have a little 51 Volkswagen out there, absolutely gorgeous, built for export. My Volkswagen that was from the 60s was never as nice as what this one is. However, on the reader board, I have a picture of the Tatra. And if you don't know that that's a Tatra, you think, well, dude, that's a really old, rough prototype Volkswagen Beetle. No, it's not. Tatra is the one who designed that car. Ferdinand Porsche took it, turned it into the Beetle, and Tatra was going to sue Porsche, and Porsche was going to settle. And Hitler said, I'll take care of the problem because Tatra was in Czechoslovakia. He just invaded Czechoslovakia, and the problem was solved. But the guy who designed the car was a gentleman by the name of Paul Jarret, who had worked for Zeppelin. He came up with what they called the teardrop or the inverted bathtub design. He winds up coming to the United States, gets the rights to all of his work, and lo and behold, Chrysler comes out with the Airflow, and he sues Chrysler because they stole his design. He wins in court. In fact, the Chrysler's lawyer said, pay the guy. You stole his work. But that was like the first aerodynamic car in the United States, and a lot of people liked it. I mean, it was very, very different. But, there were problems with the Airflow that had really nothing to do with the design, but they did pull it off the market. And Chrysler sort of took a big step back, but everybody else jumped in with both feet and changed the way American cars look. So you went from that really boxy car that was better aerodynamically if you drove it backwards into these cars that now had the beautiful flowing lines and very curvy. And you got rid of the big radiator in the front. They all went under the grills. And cars took a whole different switch. But if you don't know what happened back in Czechoslovakia, you can miss how that translated into what happened in the U.S. car market. So it's stories like that where you can show people. And so we do have an Airflow. I'm hoping we will bring it back in the Savoy because I want to say, give me the Airflow. Give me the 32 Buick that is square and boxy, with the Volkswagen in between that and the Airflow, and we can tie the whole story in and how 2 years, everything changed in the design market for U.S. cars.
So you're almost like a little historian as well.
Pretty much so. Pretty much so. And I really, what really makes me, because I do tours also, because I want to stay in touch with the people that are coming in and visiting the museum. I want to get feedback from them. And a lot of times we will find that, couples will come in. He's the car guy. She's sort of like, I'm here because my husband, I'm really not into cars. But by the end of the tour, they'll say, after I've read everything, I've learned so much that this was just not necessarily about cars. This is way bigger. I've had such a good time. And even car guys will tell me, I've always focused on the technical end. I never knew that there was the backstory to it. And the backstories are just as interesting, sometimes even more so.
Well, Mary, we are just about up against the clock, but I have to tell you that I mean this honestly. Out of all the ladies that I've had on my radio show over all the years, okay, and then includes Denise McCluggage, okay, who I really truly enjoyed talking to. You are by far the most knowledgeable. And again, I say this, and I mean this seriously, because I listened to some of the other audios that you did, and you obviously have an amazing background, and obviously you're in a perfect situation because you get to do all that research and stuff. But I want to thank you for coming on the show. We got probably a few seconds left here. For our listeners, tell them real quick, if they want to find out about the Savoy Automobile Museum, how do they go about doing it?
It's called, the website is savoymuseum.org. It will have all the information on there. It will tell you what all the exhibits are, along with what are the cars that are presently on the floor. It will tell you what all the upcoming exhibits are. In September on the 6th, we have our big car show that we do once a year. And when you pull up the website, you'll get to see we're pretty much like on a park-like setting, and it's 300 show cars on the lawn. Lots of fun.
Okay. And real quick, how much does it cost to get in?
$17 for adults, and I think children under 5 might be free, and I think little kids are like $5, something like that. I don't have that in here. And can I ask you a real quick question?
Real quick.
Trivia question. Where did Grand Funk Railroad get their name from? The band.
You caught me. We're just about out of time, and I'm gonna email you that. And I want to thank Mary. Thank you very much for hanging out with us. My special guest from Savoy Automobile Museum. I want to thank all my listeners for tuning into Nostalgic Radio Cars. Don't forget, every Tuesday between 7 and 8 p.m. on the Talk Radio Network right here in downtown Clearwater. Stay safe, drive carefully, love your family. See you guys.